Hi everybody, I'm Kate. If you haven't been to my channel before, this is Create, Quilt and Make with Kate. And I thought today, on my channel I do a lot of different types of projects, and often it's been quilting or yarn products, but I've been doing a lot of clothing sewing lately, and I have found it a little bit difficult to do the filming of that, so I've invested in a few technical components like tripods and things like that just recently, and so I'm going to try and do some filming of the sewing patterns and the clothing that I'm making. Today I'm going to show you the cutting out and starting of a project. I'm making a top out of this, which is rayon, and I've just starched it. Rayon can be a little bit slippery sometimes if you don't manage it well, and so today I've just starched the rayon to make it a bit less slippery during the cutting and sewing process. I'd also like to do a shout out to a company called Pattern Emporium. Now, I've recently discovered Pattern Emporium probably in the last, I guess probably 2 years, almost 18 months maybe. And I've sewn for a lot of years, but I haven't been making clothing lately because I got really fed up with the big 4 pattern making companies. When I'd buy a pattern and invest money in purchasing the pattern and the fabric and all the time involved in making it, and then I'd end up with a beautifully sewn garment that wouldn't fit. But Pattern Emporium has solved that for me. So if you haven't discovered Pattern Emporium, get online and have a look at their patterns. They've got all sorts of different garments in both stretch, knit and woven. There's summer, there's winter, there's all sorts of different things that you can make. And the team at Pattern Emporium are amazing. Their patterns fit, and if you follow the fitting instructions when you're choosing your pattern size, then the patterns will fit. They also have a whole lot of instructions on how to make adjustments if you're full busted or have other different body shape components that make sometimes fitting garments a little bit more difficult. And there's an online presence as well. So if you have a particular question about a garment, if somebody hasn't dealt with the problem before and put up their comments already, then the team at Pattern Emporium are really happy to come on and help you with those sorts of inquiries as well. So get on to Pattern Emporium. This particular top I'm going to make today is the About Town Popover shirt. And basically it's just a throw over your head garment with, in the case that I'm making, a facing and an open neck and a collar. And then you can choose some various sleeve options. Today I'm going to go with a long sleeve option out of this rayon, but you can choose all the different options, and lots of the patterns that Pattern Emporium make have a whole lot of different ways that you can customize it to make it your own. So that's what I'm going to do today. I have made this pattern maybe 5 or 6 times before, and I have what we call Pattern Emporium called multi-sized it. So in the past I've made the top one size smaller than the hip because it was what I thought was working, and it does work for me. But this time I'm actually just going with a straight size. So this one's just going to be a straight size 10, and we're going to have a go at that today and see how it goes. This particular fabric came from an online fabric company called Super Cheap Fabrics, and this particular one was on special. And I bought, I think, 4 fabrics at the time that I bought this one, but it's been sitting there for a couple of months waiting to be made up, and today's the day. And of course, I'm a little bit lazy with my stretch knit fabrics, and I often don't pre-wash those because there's stretch in them. But for all of your woven fabrics, make sure you put them through the washing machine and give them a bit of a wash before you make your garment. Otherwise you spend a lot of time making a garment and then you wash it and it shrinks, and so it doesn't fit the way you expect. So here we go, we're going to get into it today. We're going to lay out the pattern, cut out this popover top from Pattern Emporium, and then hopefully I'll be able to show you some of the sewing process as we go, and then I'll get this video up online so that you can see. And while I'm getting organised today, I've pulled out my scissors that are designed for cutting silkier fabric, so rayon is one of those. These are my Kai scissors. If you can afford to invest in the best quality pair of scissors that you can, do that because they're a really good tool, and when you have a pair of scissors that cuts like butter, you really enjoy the sewing process. I also, some time ago, made this sewing scissor case, and this is on my YouTube channel, so if you'd like to know how to make a case for your scissors, you can go on and have a look at that as well. It's called the serrated scissor case, and this is made out of leftover fabrics from other things that I've made. So it's a great way to use up your scraps. So Kai scissors, and the serrated scissor case is on my YouTube channel as well. So let's get sewing. It's important to do an accurate cut, because if your cutting is a little bit out, and for example if your pinning of the pattern is a little bit out, and then if you don't sew in the right place, all of a sudden your garment changes size and shape. So it's really important, if you want to build or sew a beautiful garment, then you have to make sure that your foundations are really strong. So I've cut out the front and the back pieces here now. And I've planned it so that I've got enough fabric left in this bottom half to be able to cut out the collar and the sleeve. And because the sleeve has to be done as a mirror image, it's easy to fold this in half now rather than cut the sleeve twice. It means that I can cut it as a mirror image in one cut. The other thing is, and the Pattern Emporium patterns will tell you, but when you're making anything, you need to follow the grain line. So you can see here this line that says grain line, and the grain line is really important. The grain line runs up and down the same direction as the threads on the material. Occasionally you can turn it the opposite way, but you have to be careful. But you run it up and down the thread lines of the fabric. And if you don't put the grain line on the pattern onto the grain line of the fabric, when you wear the garment, sometimes it does strange things. So for example, when I hold that, it sort of hangs nice and straight. But when I hang it on the diagonal, you get all sorts of kinks and funny stretches on it. So the grain line in pattern making is designed to run in the right direction down the fabric so that it pulls in the right way. And if you put all the pattern pieces on and try and make them fit where you think that they use the least fabric, if they're not on the grain line, then your finished garment it'll look odd. All the pulls will be in the wrong places. So grain line's really, really important. So I've cut out all the pattern pieces here now. And I've also cut out the interfacing. So when you're using interfacing, don't skip it. If the pattern says you need interfacing, you need it. Your interfacing should be lighter weight than your fabric. Otherwise, your fabric will be really stiff in the areas where the interfacing is. So because the rayon, and remember this one's been starched, because it's such a fluid, drapey fabric, the interfacing that I've used is really light and floaty too. If you were making a more structured jacket or something that had to really kind of stand up and the fabric was thicker and like a denim or like a really stiff fabric, then you'd use a more heavyweight interfacing. But if your fabric is really light and floaty, then you want to use a light interfacing. The interfacing, you can get a couple of different types. You can get sew-in, which obviously you sew in, and then you can get fusible interfacing, and this one's a fusible interfacing. You can tell if it's fusible interfacing because it has a smooth side and then a side that has sort of little rough dots on it, and those little rough dots are the glue. So when you cut out the pieces, you need to make sure that you cut the interfacing either right side up or down so that it matches the pattern piece, so that the glue sticks to the pattern or the fabric that you've cut. If you cut the interfacing wrong side up, you might find that it won't attach to the fabric, and instead of attaching to the fabric, it'll attach to your iron, which is not a good thing and it's hard to remove. So make sure that you pay attention to the glue on your fusible interfacing, and if that's what you've decided to use. I also cut out my interfacing at the same time as cutting out all my pattern pieces, because I clear my kitchen bench and that's where I do my cutting, and it's annoying to have to come back and do the same clearing of the bench so that I can cut out my interfacing. So I always cut out the interfacing at the same time. And then the next thing I will do is go and iron it onto the pieces that need to have the interfacing on them so that it's done. And when I'm sitting at my sewing machine and I get to that step in the pattern where it says to go and interface the item that you're about to stitch on, it's already interfaced and I can just move on to the next step. So a little bit of prep like that makes things quicker and easier. So what I'm going to do now is clear my kitchen bench of sewing things so that I can use it for dinner later tonight, and then I'm going to head into the sewing room and I might get a start on this evening to see how we go. So this is a make of a Pattern Emporium pattern called the Popover shirt, About Town Popover shirt, and go onto the website. They have a whole lot of variations of short sleeves and cap sleeves and long sleeves, and there's different lengths, and they cater for people of different body lengths. And my arms are long, and I sort of didn't always realize that, and it dawned on me that whenever I've bought long sleeve clothing in the past from ready to wear companies, I always find that the sleeves are a little bit short. So I've actually made a 5 centimeter adjustment in the sleeve length of this particular garment that I'm making on the pattern. So when I cut out my fabric, the fabric is a little bit longer. This design from the Pattern Emporium also has an integrated cuff, where you fold it back a certain way and stitch it so that it gives you a cuff on the end of the sleeve. And I find with my personal body proportions that cuffs aren't so flattering for me. So I turn instead of folding the folds outwards and stitching them on with an edge to make the cuff, I just fold them inside and make a nice deep hem. And it's more flattering for me. And I also love the way that you can make your own clothing, and you can do these little adjustments to make it exactly how it works for you and how you like it. And quite often in fabric manufacturing processes now, there's this big effort to try and save money to increase profits. And they save money by cutting things out of the smallest amount of fabric that they can, which means that often on ready-to-wear garments in shops, the seam allowances are really thin, and sometimes in some applications a really fine seam allowance is actually desirable, but in a lot of cases it actually shows the difference in quality between garments, because a manufacturer that is a bit better quality and makes better quality garments will have those nicer finishes of deeper hems. And you can do that at home, and the cost is negligible when you're making them at home. But it's so much nicer than little skimpy hems on things that you see in shops. So making your own garments, you get to make them how you like. Now you can see I've pinned my facing on for the neckline, and I'm going to stitch along my stitching lines. I found in the past that when I use my regular sewing machine foot, I can't see the corner, and the corner is really important. So what I'm going to use is my open-toed embroidery foot, and that means that I can stitch down and I can see where I need to pivot at that point. In the bottom corner. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. I've stitched my facing on, and you can see the facing on the inside here. The facing's been finished on the edge and understitched, and I'm really happy with my little point here at the bottom. The lines look symmetrical, so they're the same on both sides. My point looks really neat, and I'm really happy that this diamond in the middle here falls central. The pattern is not absolutely lined up, so you can't draw an exact line all the way down through them, but this one here in the center front is showing as being central, so I'm really happy about that, and I did plan that in the cutting out process. The next step, if you're following the patterns as given by Pattern Emporium, is to do a top stitch on the top. And the other shirts that I've made using this pattern, I have done that top stitching. I haven't made rayon in this pattern before, so the shirts that I've made using this pattern before have all been made using either cotton or linen fabrics, and so the rayon's a little bit softer and silkier. I've also been on a bit of a mission with all the sewing that I've been doing of my own clothes to improve the finishes on the inside of the garments and to bring an element of a bit of couture to the finishing. And so today I'm actually not going to top stitch this. I'm going to put in a few very tiny little stitches on the underside just to hold that facing in place. But I want to keep that nice soft line. I don't want to have a top stitched line on this one, so I'm actually going to skip that this time. Shoulder seams have been stitched together, so the front and back have been joined together at the shoulder. Now the instructions in the pattern say to serge them, and I don't have a serger, so I normally would use a zigzag, like a 3-step zigzag. But lately I've been doing a mock French seam. So what I'm going to do is turn these two edges in together to hide the raw edges on the inside, and then I'm going to stitch by hand across the top. It does take longer. It takes probably 3 or 4 times longer to finish the seam than it does to do the seam, but it's so much nicer. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do that later on the side seams as well when I get to that part of the shirt as well. I finished the shoulder seam now, and I've turned the two edges in like this of the seam, and then I've stitched across the top, and you can see how they make a really neat little edge. And you certainly could serge them. There's nothing wrong with that, but in my quest to make the finish of my garments more couture on the inside, that's how I finished these today. And I'm quite happy with that. It did take a little bit longer, but it's a garment that I hope to be able to wear for a long time, and so I don't mind spending a bit longer in the finish. I've spent some time now and I have stitched on my collar and turned it in. The Pattern Emporium instructions indicate that you should or could top stitch, but I've decided not to top stitch because I don't want any stitches on the outside, and I finished the inside by hand in tiny little stitches. You can also see the facing on the neckline, and again that was recommended or on the pattern as being an area where you can top stitch, but I decided to finish that by hand too, and that makes it sort of disappear, so you can't see those tiny little stitches that I've done. What I'm doing now is I've sewn the side seams, and so this is a side seam that I've stitched here, and what I'm going to do now is turn it into a mock French seam, and I've pinned this one already. So if you look here, you can see I've turned those edges in. What I'm going to do is stitch by hand and finish that seam so that the raw edges disappear on the inside like a mock French seam. It's the same as the seam that I've done on the shoulders. So when I'm finished, this is what it looks like. And it's really neat. And with rayon, that is a fabric that will fray, having these nice neat seams on that disappear basically is really nice. And it doesn't add any extra bulk to the garment. I just wanted to show you the completion of this garment, and I know that I started showing you what I was up to, and then I sort of skipped ahead and I finished it now, and I've actually worn it, so it fits beautifully, and it was nice to wear. So this was a fabric bought from Super Cheap Fabrics. It's a rayon. It was on special at the time, and I bought 1.5 meters of it to make a shirt from Pattern Emporium's collection. So if you go onto the Pattern Emporium website, they have an amazing number of patterns that you can purchase to make garments, from tops to t-shirts to pants to shorts to skirts and dresses. And they have patterns that include woven and knit fabrics, and the instructions are amazing and the patterns all fit. I got really frustrated when I was sewing years and years ago. I used to make a lot of clothes, but I would make beautifully made clothes and they wouldn't fit because the big four pattern companies relied on a lot more assumption in the way that you could actually work to fit a garment. And there's two parts to sewing. One is the sewing and the other is the fitting. But if you go onto the Pattern Emporium website, their instructions are amazing, and they give you information that allows you to follow their instructions, which are really detailed. So if you're a beginner sewer, it doesn't leave anything out. If you're an experienced sewer, you might find there's a few extra instruction pages there that you don't actually need to complete the garments. However, even as a reasonably experienced sewer myself, I found there's a lot of tips in those very basic instructions that I've found really useful. So it's really worthwhile investing in the patterns from Pattern Emporium. Anyway, this one here that I've made is the About Town Popover shirt, and as with many Pattern Emporium patterns on the website, they have various options. So this one you can make as a cap sleeve, you can make it as a short sleeve, you can make it as a long sleeve. In their Facebook presence, there's other people who have made sleeveless versions, and they talk about how to do that. And on Facebook, there's often people posting photos of completed garments that they've made and talking about the variations and the things that they did to make them their own. So this one here, I'm going to show you basically, I've been spending a lot of time with the clothing that I've been making to make the finishes more beautiful. And so you can see here, when I finished the hem, I've turned it up the same distance as recommended, and then I finished it by hand. And that means on the outside of the garment you don't see a top stitching where the hem is sewn. If you want to do the top stitching, of course you can do that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with doing a top stitched hem, and it's certainly much quicker, and obviously depending on the fabric too, like if you're making a linen or a cotton, a top stitching is actually a nice effect. I just like the visible or the invisibility, if you like, of the hand stitched hem in this case. I've also spent time finishing my seams. So for example, this is the cuff, and you can see that I've turned the seam in here as a mock French seam, and where my seams all join under the arm, you can see that they're all really neat and really tidy. And it means that the seams won't unravel, and it looks beautiful on the inside as well. The same with the neck facing. So the Popover top pattern has two different finishes for the necklines, and because my fabric is not the same pretty color on the inside as it is on the outside, if you make the other option, which is I can't remember the wording that they use, but just a turned edge along this central seam down the front, then it means that when you wear the shirt and it opens back, you can actually see the inside, where having the facing on the inside like this means that when the shirt sits open, obviously it's inside at the moment, but when it sits open you see more of this same fabric and not the inside. And you can see here looking at it that the facing stitching line is not visible at all. On the inside I have stitched it down so the facing doesn't open, but it's tiny little stitches that come through on the front and you don't even see those stitches. So when this shirt is worn, there's no stitching on the outside that can be seen at all. And it's just one other way that you can make an item of clothing. You don't have to do it this way, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with top stitching. It's just in this particular garment I didn't want to have the top stitching. So that's my About Town Popover top. This one here is made in a rayon from Super Cheap Fabrics using the pattern from Pattern Emporium, and it's a long sleeve option with the collar and the facing, and it was a lot of fun to make. It's really easy, and the instructions that come with the patterns when you purchase them are amazing as well. So get out and have a go. So this is Create, Quilt and Make with Kate. Thanks for watching, and hope to see you again.